In this chapter of the Odyssey, the suitors show us their true colors, allowing Homer an opportunity to teach us about justice. Hello and welcome, or welcome back. Today we are reading the great books of Western civilization, continuing with the Odyssey. I'm using the Robert Fagles translation, and this is Book 2. Telemachus wakes and orders the heralds to call all the people of Ithaca, including the suitors and their families, to assembly. Once they have gathered, Telemachus explains his plight. First, that his father is lost, and second, that these suitors lay siege to his house and his mother, against her will. He shares that he knows he is powerless to fight them off, nor could he do so with all of the citizens together. So he begs by Zeus that the suitors' families get them out of his house. He can do nothing else. No one can bring themselves to speak as they pity the young man, until Antinous, the leader of the suitors, responds with indignation that any of the damages to Odysseus' house and family could be blamed on them. Instead, he says, Penelope is to blame, for she had them wait for 3 years pretending to be weaving a shroud for Odysseus' father. Antinous goes on to make a counter-proposal. Telemachus could kick Penelope out of his house and send her back to her father to be courted there. Until then, they refuse to leave. Telemachus rejects this proposal outright. He would suffer terrible consequences both from Penelope's father and the gods above if he kicked his own mother out of the house. So he repeats his challenge from the night before. If the suitors insist on staying, they have been warned that the god's vengeance is coming. At that moment, Zeus sends a bird sign overhead to seal his prayer. A prophet among the citizens speaks up to confirm this sign, and further predicts that Odysseus will soon come home, unrecognized by all. Eurymachus, another of the suitors' leaders, cuts the prophet's speech off, denying his interpretation of the sign and promising to harm both him and Telemachus if this prophecy encourages the boy to fight. They have nothing to fear from anyone, he says, and he repeats that Telemachus should send Penelope away, and that none of the suitors are going to go anywhere until he does, and furthermore there will be no apology or reparations for the damage they have done. Telemachus responds firmly, "The gods know where everyone stands on this issue, and they will judge in time." He asks the townsfolk for a ship and a crew for his journey that will allow him to go and look for news of his father. If he finds Odysseus is dead, he says, he will return home and help facilitate his mother's marriage to another man, as Athena suggested. The other inhabitants, however, are not quite ready to let the matter of the suitors go. Mentor, Odysseus' old friend and the steward of his household, berates the citizens for allowing the suitors to do what they are doing, holding them responsible for their lack of action. Leocritus, another suitor, responds to this by promising that not only would the citizens fail in a fight against the suitors, but that even if Odysseus himself showed up to drive them out, they would just kill him. The assembly ends. Athena disguises herself as Mentor and appears to Telemachus, telling him not to be discouraged, and promises that she will go and find him a crew and a ship for his journey, while he goes to the house to make preparations to leave. Back at the house, Antinous offers to let Telemachus ride on his own ship with his own crew for the journey, but Telemachus refuses. If he were to go on that ship, the suitors would be in control of where he went, and they would bring him wherever they pleased. Telemachus and his nurse Eurycleia prepare food rations for the journey, and he swears her to secrecy. Meanwhile, disguised Athena walks through the town, hiring a crew and finding a ship for the journey. The two meet up that night with their crew and leave the shores of Ithaca under the cover of darkness. In this chapter, the themes that we've spoken about before, like fate, free will, and hospitality, are woven together with new ones, like piety and justice. Telemachus does what he should to resolve his issues peacefully and without violence. He calls the whole island to assembly, including the suitors and their families, and makes appeals to their shame and to the displeasure of the gods. By God, it's intolerable what they do. Disgrace, my house a shambles. You should be ashamed yourselves, mortified in the face of neighbors living round about. Fear the gods' wrath before they wheel in outrage and make these crimes recoil on your heads. He admits in his speech that not even with the whole island in arms would he be able to face down the suitors. He even offers to settle monetarily if what's happening was provoked by some offense. Very civil, right? But there's more to it than that. This is something else that's new for Homer. Telemachus and Homer are making appeals to justice, but a justice that is linked to and comes from piety. That is, from the gods. Let me explain. In the Iliad, justice was never really discussed in much detail. There were really no actions that all of the gods would be angered by. Sure, there were some things that Athena would be angry about if they were done to the Greeks, or things that Apollo would be mad about if done to the Trojans, but neither of them would have cared about those same actions being done to the other side. But here, Telemachus calls Zeus, the one who sets assemblies free and calls us into session, as he will later be called Zeus of the strangers, who guards all guests and suppliants. Not just some, but all. By broadening the protections of the gods in this way, we are much closer to an idea of a universal justice that's consistent for every person regardless of status than we were before. We're not there, but we're much closer. Seeing how we have ample evidence that the Odyssey was written after the Iliad, this is clearly another development in philosophy for the Greeks. So, Telemachus knows he can cry out to the gods for vengeance because Zeus protects the relationship of hosts and guests everywhere. Justice that comes from the gods, from piety. Fittingly, therefore, the suitors scorn both concepts. They respond to Telemachus's appeal in the peaceful assembly by threatening violence against him and even against Odysseus if he should arrive. This is unjust and defeats the purpose of the peaceful assembly. Eurymachus also goes and disrespects Halitherses, the prophet who interprets the bird sign sent by Zeus, totally rejecting his prophecy. This isn't only disrespect for the seer and Telemachus, but it's also making a mockery of the gods' signs of piety. In any case, they show scorn for the gods' laws as well as the gods themselves, proving themselves both unjust and impious. The thing about justice, though, is that it presupposes free will. It is unjust to be punished for something that you weren't free not to do, or that the gods made you do. But that's not what Homer is showing us. By contrast, every word that comes out of the suitor's mouth is a reconfirmation for us as readers that what they're doing to Telemachus and to Odysseus' family is perfectly intentional, carefully chosen, and carefully planned. They would not change a thing. Homer even draws our attention to details that make them even more evil than we would already think. For example, they court Penelope while Odysseus is alive, but they also don't care if he was alive. And furthermore, he was good to them. He was a good king at a time when apparently most kings weren't. Another example, not only are they courting Penelope against her will, but they want it to be against her will, and they want this marriage to be forced on her by Telemachus, by her father, as well as them. Every possible scenario in which the suitors might appear more relatable or understandable to us, or they might turn aside because of the consequences coming, Homer has them double down on stupid instead. This is, again, emphasizing free will. Athena, disguised as Mentor, even refers to the Black Death hovering close by their heads. Not a death fated by prophecy or happenstance like in the Iliad, but one brought about simply as a consequence of their own evil. Besides the suitors who commit injustice directly, we are told that the townspeople could be held accountable for their inaction as well. I don't grudge these arrogant suitors for a moment, but all the rest of you, how you rouse my fury, sitting here in silence. Homer is teaching us, as he was teaching the ancient Greeks. He's not dumbing things down, just explaining it clearly, that humans have free will and can either choose good or evil with it. This is not to say that Homer is blind to nuances, though. With that in mind, let's talk about Penelope. She is the wife of Odysseus and cares for him very deeply. This shows that they had a good relationship and loved each other well, to say the least. Antinous describes Penelope as having a fine mind and subtle wiles. Not one could equal Penelope for intrigue. Does that remind you of anybody? It sounds remarkably similar to these words used to describe Odysseus back in the Iliad. Odysseus, quick at every treachery under the sun. No man alive could rival Odysseus. They are two of a kind, so it's no wonder they get along so well. We can surmise, though, that Penelope does feel some kind of pressure to choose a new husband once speculations of his demise begin to circulate. I think this could be potentially for her son's benefit, as well as for hers. Flipping back to the Iliad, look at Andromache's words about the fate of her son Astyanax after her husband Hector died. Without Hector, she says, pains and labor will plague him all his days to come. Strangers will mark his lands off, steal his estates. If Odysseus is dead, Penelope can't necessarily afford to spurn the suitors irreparably. Even so, she does everything she can to avoid choosing a new husband, buying as much time as possible for Odysseus to come home. Antinous tells the story. This was her latest masterpiece of guile. She set up a great loom in the royal halls, and she began to weave. Go slowly, keen as you are to marry me, until I can finish off this web. A shroud for old Lord Laertes for that day when the deadly fate will take him down. So by day she'd weave at her great and growing web. By night, by the light of torches, she would unravel all she'd done. During this time, Penelope also did what she could to learn of Odysseus' fate, turning to seers and mystics, as Telemachus refers to. She still holds out hope that Odysseus is out there and will be home soon. 3 whole years she deceived us blind, seduced us with this scheme. One of her women told the truth, and we caught her in the act. So she finished it off, against her will. We forced her. Given what we've learned of the suitors in this chapter and their willingness to use force, it's worth considering that she has reason to believe that an outright refusal of the suitors would not go well, that it might be met with dire consequences for both her son and herself. Telemachus is right to say that she is neither rejecting a suitor nor taking one up on their offer, but it's possible that her motivations are more complex than he believes as well. In the last chapter, I talked about how Telemachus needed the advice and guidance of a fatherly figure in order to stand up and take responsibility for improving his own situation. Athena continues to provide this affirmation after the assembly, once he's discouraged once again, this time in the shape of Mentor, from whom we get that same word. Telemachus, you'll neither lack courage nor sense from this day on, not if your father's spirit courses through your veins. So how can your journey end in shipwreck or defeat? Few sons are the equals of their fathers. Most fall short, all too few surpass them. But you, brave and adept from this day on, Odysseus' cutting has hardly given out in you. Put them out of your mind, these suitors. They're madmen. It cannot be overstated just how important and impactful this kind of encouragement is for a young man or a young woman. And look, again, just how much Telemachus grows in a short time with it. Every time he speaks, the suitors are shocked. They don't believe it's the same person, almost. Nevertheless, Telemachus discovers that he's still not able to solve all of his issues by himself. We are hardly the ones to fight them off. All we do is parade our wretched weakness, a boy inept at battle. There's nothing I can do. That's okay, though. This does not invalidate his transformation that he went through in the last book, because we are told that he is now self-possessed. He knows what he needs help with and what he doesn't, and who is trustworthy to provide it for him. He accepts the help of Mentor, Athena disguised, and Eurycleia, and refuses that of Antinous, all while continuing to focus on what he can do, instead of brooding about what he can't, thanks to Athena's guidance. To successfully grow up, you need to have the resolve to act, to help yourself, and to trust in others who are able to help you. Thus, those of us who are trying to grow up, or who know someone that is, can learn a lot from Telemachus. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel for more Great Books commentary. We'll see you next time with the Odyssey Book 3.